originally I was going to be a student, and married very young instead, and came to Fort Collins on the very day I married in 1966. And I think it was the next January, that was in June, January started classes at CSU. I was going to major in English, or I did major in English. I was going to be an English secondary teacher. And then we had a child, and thought maybe I needed to work. So I took the exam for state classified, I think they called it something different then, and was on a wait list, and got a call as a temporary 2-week position in the College of Home Economics, the dean's office, working for an associate dean. And in the meantime, my test came through, and a position opened in textiles and clothing. And Wes Westfall, someone from the past who's no longer with us, asked me if I would be interested in the position. So that's how I started in the college, home economics, textiles and clothing specifically, in 1969. March 18th specifically, and I made $333 a month. I can't tell you what I made when I retired, but I remember that paycheck. So that seemed like a lot of money for a young woman with no degree. So that was my beginning. And so I stayed with the department 4 or 5 years, and Margaret Hazeas was a friend of Pat Wilson, who was in the department, and she seemed to like me and like my skills, so she asked if I would come to work for her. She was the assistant dean. So I was very flattered, and of course it was a promotion, so I went to work for Margaret for, many years, until she retired. And then Kevin Olchenbrunst became the assistant dean. And I guess the short to that story is I stayed with that same college the entire 31 years I was there, through name changes, mergers, 2 or 3 or so promotions. But I basically stayed in the same college the entire time. So I didn't need to change or seek anything else. It changed around me, and opportunities came to me.
So that says a lot about you now. You know, that isn't true for a lot of people, to be able to withstand that much leadership change.
Yes, there was leadership change. But that was kind of the fun of it too, was the change and the challenges and the learning. It was constant learning. I am as fond of the early days of responsibilities as much as where I ended up with much more responsible things to do. But it was a great career, great place to, and it was a great fit for me because I came from rural Colorado, where I was in 4-H, and I got the Home Economics Award as a freshman, and so the home economics piece was a great fit right off the bat. And then even after the mergers, it always felt right. I was on committees over the years and got to know more about other colleges, and I was so thankful I was in the college I was in because it was a fit for me. Well, yes, I did do a lot of different things. And in the last several years, I was the staff person responsible for administering the scholarship process. That meant working with faculty to actually develop from the beginning to the end, from the application to selection process, to working with the students as they signed to accept the scholarship, to planning the award ceremony, and also working with the donors. So it was a very much hands-on. I was involved in probably every piece of the scholarship process, and spent my spring breaks looking over all of the applications, collapsing them into set of worksheets that would go to the faculty after spring break, and they would then do what they needed to do, and we'd come back together as a group and make selections. So it was just a fun process, because it's kind of like going to get your hair done. Nobody's ever unhappy at a hair salon, so nobody's ever unhappy at a scholarship event or commencement. They were just places to celebrate and honor achievements. So that was the fun part. Commencement, there again, was the staff component of preparing for that. Kevin, or the assistant or associate dean, and all the years I worked with it, it was Kevin, was actually the faculty component of pulling that event together. But it seems like we sent handwritten, well, there were invitations sent, preparing the program, right up to the very day of or day before commencement. We would go over and insert our program insert into the big university booklet, and order pizzas and work study all there, just getting ready for the excitement. Showing up 2 or 3 hours early to reserve chairs for the disabled and elderly, greeting all the families, overseeing the ushering. We called it ushering, which was distributing the programs. But I think prior to that, it would have been working with the committee, the college committee, and then there's a committee person that works on the university component of that, and I occasionally would attend that. So it seems like so far back now that I'm missing some of the details of planning for commencement, but definitely another favorite thing to do. And I always think about the big responsibilities I had, like commencement and the Mary Scott Lecture Series and the Scholarship Awards Ceremony, are like planning a big wedding. And then there are lots of wedding showers through the year, but they're all going to happen whether you're ready or not, just like Christmas or whatever. So you better be ready. So we were always juggling timelines of the various events and what needed to be done at that very moment, and into the night many times. So long days, long weeks in preparing for those events. Always juggling events. They were all deadline driven. Everything I did had a deadline, I'm certain. And just prioritizing on a daily basis what needs to be done most today. But I think that was the fun part of it. And it definitely prepared me for the career I have today of real estate. You have to reevaluate and prioritize every day. All of these were events. Yes, there's a scholarship process, but it's also ends up in a ceremony and a presentation and awarding and recognizing these students, whether it's at a scholarship ceremony, commencement. It sounds like a party planner, but it wasn't that at all, because it was all academic based. But events are important. Celebration is important. Recognition is important for all the achievements that the students did. So, and again, it was fun to be able to work with faculty, staff, and students in doing all of those things. So, had great relationships with faculty and students. Even more so, I think I've got more faculty friends than anything in preparing for these events and being on the various committees that were required to put these together. At the time it was Human Resource Sciences, but that was Home Economics renamed, and we merged with the College of Professional Studies into a very diverse type of college, home economics type majors, and then professional studies was construction management, social work, physical education, communication disorders, and exercise and sports science. So at that time, it was very scary for a lot of people, lots of meetings and what's happening here, because it was clear that something was coming down the pike with these two colleges. So when the merger came through, we became Applied Human Sciences, but it was clear that you're only going to need one dean and one budget person and one assistant dean, et cetera, et cetera. So there were people who lost positions, and I wasn't sure whether I would have a job. But they did retain my position, but kind of redesigned it so that it would take on the things like scholarship, commencement, etc., Mary Scott Lecture Series, so that we could centralize many of the things that had been done in departments before the merger. Home economics had worked more centralized than professional studies had. They had done specifically the scholarships they'd done by department, but they were convinced after the merger that we were going to go in a centralized fashion in many things, and there was resistance. I have some fun stories about that, but it wasn't long. We were on board with everybody, and so I had a very self-designed kind of position from then on. Oh, I think I liked the learning process and the kind of the adrenaline rush of meeting a deadline, getting things done, and every day looked different. It's much like my career now. Every day was a little different because you're at a different place getting ready for commencement, and maybe you've already started working on the Mary Scott Lecture Series that's not coming up for another 2 years. So you've got planning going on at different stages for everything that we did. So, and because of that, I was around different people, different faculty, different students. It really was a great variety of things. And then when it's over, you breathe a sigh of relief and start in, and you've got the energy to work on something, another project that's got a closer deadline. And so it was just refreshing to always kind of get through something and start something new. I probably liked working with the students initially because I was so near their age. I was 19 when I started my first job, and I really identified with the students and the fashion and just the youthfulness. And then, of course, I got older and the students didn't. So I remember thinking, boy, these students are looking younger all the time. That happened several times, actually. But later in my career, I was honored to have many work studies who I supervised or was responsible in kind of coordinating. And I really liked that because I was still young enough to kind of identify with them. And I think some of them kind of needed a younger mother figure or something. I don't know. I had great relationships with the students. And again, the scholarship process, they would all have to see me one-on-one to sign and accept their scholarship. So I would get to know them at that point. And they were so honored to receive a scholarship. And so, what would I say? They were just so something to be proud of, these young people. It didn't matter whether they'd received $100 or $5,000. They were all just very appreciative that they were selected. So that was always a fun experience to have those appointments and to prepare the letters to mail them so that they get to open something fun and then come in a little bit later. Well, let's see, the flood, yes, we lived on the east side of town, and we had been raining off and on all day, but we got a mere 2 inches of rain. I got a call from my parents who lived on the west side of town, so my husband and I went over there about 10 at night to find 12 to 14 inches of rain had dumped on their home. So we helped them bail water out of their basement and headed home down Prospect, and couldn't get any further because the train had derailed. And I looked over to let's see, what was that called? It doesn't matter. They're garden level little apartments there by the railroad tracks, and saw a sofa floating out of a bedroom or something. So since we couldn't go any further anyway, I told my husband, let's go, we need to make our way around, let's go check which building was I in at that time? It's now the OT building, but where I had my office, and it took us an hour to find our way around there. I walked up on the railroad tracks and saw my files floating in my window in about 6 feet of water. And the reason I had wanted to check on the office was that a year or two before, Kevin and I were called in the night because a drain had plugged in the parking lot and the building was flooded with about a foot of water. So she and I went over and bailed water and got some help. And so I thought, we better go check this flood. Well, it was quite the flood. We could hear kids on the oval in boats already, canoes. And so I called Nancy Hartley, who was our dean, and she tried to convince me not to worry. She said, remember the drain plug? Yeah, that wasn't any big deal. And I said, Nancy, I can hear kids in boats on the oval. So it is a different kind of flood this time. So it wasn't long before she was starting to get calls, and you know, the phone chain that they had worked out. So then she assigned me to stay at home and take calls for the next 3 days just to figure out what they were going to do. So anyway, we lost everything, absolutely everything. And they housed us in a little place over between Guggenheim and the Industrial Sciences building. I believe it was a former horse carriage of some sort. We had nothing. So I was reading my mail every day because I had not much else to do, and noticed a little article about the state retirement, a new retirement plan. Made a phone call, and the guy said, ding, 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 you win the prize, after he knew how old I was and how many years I'd worked. So I could have retired in the next 3 months. But because of the flood, I didn't. I officially retired, but I stayed another 10 or 11 months to help put the office back together. Because everything was in my head. My husband, after the flood, we were allowed to go back in. They said for 45 minutes to see what we could. They put us in plastic suits and gloves and said, go in and get what you can. But they had us leave after about 20 minutes because of contamination. He was able to get 2 drawers of scholarship information out with a crowbar, and we got those out and laid them out to freeze dry, and they were sent away, or laid them out to dry on the concrete floors over at Industrial Sciences somewhere, and then they were sent away to be, whatever they called it then, freeze dried or something. But that was at the beginning of the school year, and we had every one of these events and projects that still were coming up with nothing as a resource. So it was all in my head. So I postponed the official retirement until we got that office back together. And I did it by calling all of our wonderful department head secretaries and faculty, and gathered up written materials where we could, and we never missed a beat. We had every single event that same year, like nothing had happened. But that put a little different slant on things. We couldn't just go to a notebook or a file to find anything. Had to all be recreated, and then for that reason, we did recreate good records and moved to the 2nd floor of Gibbons instead of the 1st floor so that we would not lose that kind of information again. Yeah, I don't know that I'm so much of a caretaker, but I like seeing a job well done, whatever that takes. And that means learning how to deal with all kinds of people, personalities. Ultimately, I had a dean to report to. But on the other hand, the work we're doing is for the students and for their families in many cases. So the job to be done was, you had to keep the big picture in mind. Who are you doing this for? And yes, we had a merger, and we had a lot of changes in leadership for a while. We had several deans, which was kind of difficult, but I learned early on to go with the flow, because I kind of looked at it as like, okay, sliding down a pole when new leadership would come in, because they had their expectations and ways of doing things, and so you'd go back up that pole again, and then something else would happen, and we'd have another change in leadership. But you had to be flexible and just go with the flow, because that seemed to be kind of what we were faced with at that time. I think the early ones, my early mentors were Pat Wilson. She's still here. She gave me a baby shower for my second child. I remember loving Laura Vance. Mary Jo Dallas was a neighbor and someone I worked for. So those were the textiles and clothing professors, among 2 or 3 others. And then Margaret Hazelius was the first assistant dean that I worked for. And she was a feisty one. We had a lot of fun, but she embraced me, like everyone at the university has. They've been very embracing of me, very, what should I say, for a young girl at age 19 to have a job, and I was working on a degree but didn't finish it. I just felt always very accepted and very embraced by the whole system. And I guess I had the mentality that I was there to stay, so I just made it work. Well, for my favorite places at CSU are probably for odd reasons, but my first desk was in the center of what now is the occupational therapy building. I would call it the home ec annex. So they had 3 desks facing each other, and they hired Jack Law as the new faculty overseer for restaurant management. He had all of 6 students, I believe. He did not have a space or an office, so they put him at one of those desks facing me. So I always thought, this poor man has to just sit here looking at this typist all day long, but they found him an office eventually. But he and I became friends until he passed away last year. And then when I went to work for Margaret Hazelius, she was on the back porch, we called it, of Guggenheim. And I always thought that was the coolest little space. It was like our own little sleeping porch back there. It felt different. It was actually a little add-on space, but it faced the oval. So we could see the weather change and the leaves fall, and we were right at the back door, so we could see people coming and going, and directly across from the coffee break room, which back then people actually took coffee breaks. So you got to see people coming and going all day. But I loved that little space. And then, let's see, after that, it was fun to move into the Gifford building, because Margaret was very instrumental in helping plan that building. So that was fun to be able to be a part of the Gifford building. I wasn't crazy about my particular office because I had no window. So when we went back to the Oval, my last office was in Gibbons upstairs, and I again faced the Oval. So I guess the Oval, anything around the Oval is my favorite place. Well, I've stayed involved with CSU in great part because I think the college has done a wonderful job of inviting alums or emeritus faculty and staff back to various events 2 or 3 times a year, inviting to homecoming and staff recognition events. And I feel like when I'm there, I see my old friends. That is our connection, is CSU. So they're just plain fun. I enjoy going to those. They're very, very nicely done. And just meeting up with old friends. But I also love sports, so we go to basketball games, football games, and I've got a cute little Airstream that I've now used as a tailgater. So I should find a way to reach out to my CSU friends and make sure they drop by for tailgating at football games. But and then both of my children graduated from CSU, but I now have a granddaughter in apparel design. So the very same department that I started out in 1969. Kristen is my oldest, and she was a psychology major and quickly learned that without a master's or PhD, not going to do a whole lot with psychology, but she's made a wonderful career of her staging business, and she's great with people. So I think that was a great fit for her. My son majored in history and was one of the first study abroad classes, studied in Wales in that department, and he is an attorney in Denver, an in-house attorney with level 3. He also received the faculty staff scholarship more than once, so that was something I was proud of. And he went through most of CSU on scholarships. Because of my encouragement, he didn't think he was worthy, but I knew the process, so he was able to capture some good scholarships, and but was a good student as well. So, well, I for many years took classes and worked full-time, and I had young children. And I had a really good advisor in the Department of Education. I believe his name was Masterson, and he just had me really take a long look at, was I realistically going to easily get a job teaching English, secondary English, if I couldn't relocate, which I could not. So he pretty much convinced me to just make a career of CSU, and it was working at CSU and not continuing. I could have continued to get my degree, but I put my energies into my positions in the college and made a very conscious decision just to make a career of that instead of teaching English. My current career is I am a real estate agent with RE/MAX Alliance. My husband and I got our licenses together in 1980. He became a realtor right away, but I kept my license inactive, thinking that someday I would probably take advantage of that career as well. I didn't realize it was going to be as soon as it was, because I was able to retire at age 51. But I love houses and I love people, so again, that's another great fit for me. The paperwork and all of that, not so much. Kind of tired of that, but it's been a great career, and CSU was a great training ground for that. I just think it's become an absolutely sensational institution of higher education. I remember being told, oh, we're not going to get any bigger than 23,000, or it seems like it was 18,000, and then it was 23,000. It's a big place now, but I think it's a really quality place. I think it's just getting better and better, and I still have biased feelings that I think our college is probably the best over there, just because of the kind of people that it draws as faculty, the nature of the programs, the departments, and therefore the students. So it's just a great, wholesome place to have had a career. Well, I was at a homecoming committee meeting, and I remember Gay Israel saying, we need a sponsor for this race. And he mentioned a prominent real estate company as a possibility for that sponsorship. And I said, well, you happen to have another company who that broker owner is an alum of your own department, and that happens to be Gene Bond, who was the broker owner of Remax First at the time. And anyway, I approached Gene, and he's been one of the major sponsors of that race ever since. He reminds me now and then about how much money I cost him for that connection. But I think it's been a really nice partnership. So after my retirement, I received a phone call at some point several years ago now, but a young family that we knew. We've known the father since before he was married. He has 4 grown sons now. But anyway, one of the boys dearly wanted to get into CSU and was denied. And he called and asked, it was in the summer, is there anything I could do at all? He says, I thought you worked in admissions. I said, no, I can't do anything directly or personally, but I can sure put you in contact with somebody. So I made a phone call to Mary Ontiveros, and she agreed to meet with them. And she took on the personal challenge of finding a way to admit him. He succeeded, graduated, and so that's something I'm proud of. That even after retirement, I was able to do something that was meaningful. I received a couple of awards, a couple of nominations, and then I believe it was in 1990, I got the the Superior Service Award for Outstanding Skills. That was a general university award. And then I received one in the college for service again, I think in 1995. So the one from the university, you got $1,000 with that. So that was kind of a fun little perk. I bought a piece of furniture with it that I still have. So I think because, like I say, it wasn't that I wasn't able to finish my degree. I elected not to, but I would have been the first in my family to attend college. I was the first to attend college, let alone graduate. So I loved school and dearly wanted to be a college graduate. So it's always been important to me. Higher education has been important to me. So my way of dealing with that is I just spent 31 years at school. But I've also, I have college savings that I've established for all 3 of my grandchildren. My grandson Jordan has graduated from the Metro State and is now a baseball coach. And exercise and fitness is and nutrition is his background. And his sister, my granddaughter Peyton, is in apparel design, so she's utilizing those funds. That doesn't totally take care of their education. They also need to apply for scholarships and work, but it helps. And then by the time my 7-year-old grandson capitalizes on that, he'll probably have a whole lot more to spend, but costs will be a lot greater then too. So it has felt really good to be able to help my grandchildren. My kids were able to either work on their own, provide their own education, financing, or scholarships, along with our help. But they had to work their way through school or find a way to finance it themselves. So it's very important to me to be helpful to my family in that regard. Some of the fun things I did in the later years was work with the development director. And at that time, we had a good football team again. So we were doing alumni outreach events along with bowl games. So we planned a real splashy, fun thing in San Diego at a Four Seasons hotel, and another one in Memphis. Heard B.B. King play on New Year's Eve. Oh, it was just great. Those were fun, really fun little perks to be able to travel and plan a big party, but with the purpose of outreaching our alums in those areas. So, and we did connect with kind of an interesting guy in California when we went to San Diego, somebody that Nancy Hartley was able to develop as an active alum at that point. So meaningful, even though it was fun.
Yeah.